Okay, we are going to go ahead and talk about proper exposure and what effect that has on your negative. So on the left, you see good exposure. There's a variety of light and dark. In the middle, you can see that the negatives are very thick and they are overexposed. There was too much light. And then the thin negatives on the far right, very thin and underexposed. So this all happens when you are using the exposure controls inside your camera and reading your light meter. So exposure controls being aperture and shutter speed. Because your ISO or your ASA, your film speed, has already been determined for you because we are using 400 speed film. So I'm going to zoom in to the thick negatives. These are very, very thick. You can barely see through them. And this means that you had an abundance of light. Remember that big numbers mean little things in photography. And so a bright sunny day, you would want a very small aperture of 22 or 16 or 11 and a very fast shutter speed. Because when there is an abundance of light, we need to control how much goes into the camera body. Okay, this tells me that they had much too large of an aperture, maybe a 5.6 or a 4, and a slower shutter speed of maybe 125 or 60 on a bright sunny day. And that is what your negatives are going to look like. And that is problematic because when you get into the dark room, that is going to take a lot of time for those to show up. It's going to be a very intense light. And some of these negatives, these thick ones at the top, could be up to even a minute of exposure time before anything is showing up. The thin ones, on the other hand, are underexposed. They did not have enough light. It was too dark. So they were using much too small of an aperture, like an 11 or an 8 or a 5.6. And it's way too small. They needed a large aperture like a 2.8 or a 4 to let more light in, and a slower shutter speed, again, to allow more light in to properly expose it. And here you can see the difference in the proper exposed film. There's a nice variety of light and dark and middle gray. Okay, so it is very important that you are reading your light meter correctly so that your film is properly exposed.